Hello and welcome. I'm Jo, co-founder of Culture Stretch, and joining me today is Alicia, our marketing and technical ninja. And Culture Stretch are UK authorised partners of Wiley, who own the Everything Disc products. And we are delighted to welcome you to our Everything Disc virtual showcase today. Agility starts with developing EQ. So let's get stuck into our agenda. In our jam-packed hour today, we'll take a closer look at the rising need for agile organisations in the modern work world. And from there, we'll look at the psychology of the agile worker and the very real connection between agility and emotional intelligence. Next, I'll introduce you to the Everything Disc Agile EQ product, with both some background and theory, along with a closer look at the learning experience by module, highlighting some key objectives and topics throughout both profile and facilitation. Okay, let's get stuck in. Agility, as I'm sure you know, is more than just a buzzword in the workplace today. It's probably a requirement. All of you know this, you're living it right now. Even before the events of 2020, it's likely that your organisation has undergone some kind of transformation to support organisational agility. So why are we all so eager to become more agile? Well, before the events of 2020, the marketplace was, and it continues to be, constantly reshaped by powerful macro forces. There's sweeping globalisation, rapidly advancing technology, unprecedented workforce diversity, and of course, relentless competition. And then there are the real human and economic game changers, such as COVID, utterly beyond our powers to predict, let alone actually control. And more, we all need to be primed to handle volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, also known as a VUCA environment. And today, thriving in the modern world of work just demands it. Now, recently, the Insights team at Wiley surveyed over 2,500 business professionals trying to get a better handle on the need for agility. And what they found was that actually agility might just be the key 21st century competency that organisations are striving to develop. Here are the few statistics that came our way out of that survey. 90% of respondents from individual contributors to the C-suite said that actually agility is more important now to their own individual success than it was 5 years ago. And in addition to that, 95% of managers, directors, and executives said that agility, the ability to adapt quickly and easily, is more important to their organisation's success now than it was 5 years ago. So increasingly, it seems that organisations and people require agility to navigate the work world. Now, those responses you saw on that slide were from 2,500 business professionals from around the world. But I'm curious for you to think about actually how important is agility to you in your workplace today. So what is your level of agreement with the statement, agility, the ability to adapt quickly and easily, is more important to my organisation's success now than it was 5 years ago? I'd like you to just have a think about that. There are a range of options you'll see on the screen, from strongly agree to strongly disagree, but maybe think about how this has changed for you over recent history, maybe since COVID, with the way that we work now. And then I just want to shift gears to make a distinction about agility in the world of modern work. And I'm guessing that this is probably not news to you all, but many organisations, including Wiley and ourselves at Culture Stretch, are striving to become more nimble by making their structure, their systems, and their processes more agile. Now, maybe you've flattened your organisational structure, introduced agile project management, or maybe you're encouraging more on-demand collaboration, whether that's through open office plans or integration of social networking tools like Teams or Zoom or Google Meet. And actually, this is a great start. It really is. These structural and systematic changes can very much benefit organisational agility. But the reality is, it's probably not enough. Organisations can't be agile without agile workers, agile people who are resilient, adaptable, collaborative, people who can not only withstand the rapid change that they experience each day, but they can somehow embrace it. So what does that actually look like? What does an agile organisation really mean for how people work and behave each day? So to answer this question, we can learn a lot by looking at the psychology behind the agile worker. In other words, how people must approach some of those macro trends I just mentioned to successfully navigate through them. Let's start with industry disruption. This macro trend has been gnawing at organisations for a while now. New competitors come into an industry, often by way of new technological advancements, and they can change the rules and expectations overnight. So when an organisation is at risk of becoming irrelevant, what do you need from your workforce? Well, you need people that can change direction quickly, that can communicate effectively and push back, even when faced with resistance. Social and emotional skills, such as showing resolve, being receptive, or even taking risks, become important. Now, the next trend, shifting organisational structures from maybe hierarchical to matrixed, aiming to bring those decision-making power to those individuals that are in the teams doing the work. Now, whilst this is great for creating more agile organisations, it also increases the social and emotional demands of your workforce. So things like sharing decision-making power with colleagues, that can be tricky if you're used to making those decisions just yourself. Being on multiple cross-functional teams, where's my priority lie? Where's my number one team? How do I navigate this, if there is one? And navigating ambiguous boundaries between my responsibilities and that of others, they require a lot more judgment and diplomacy than it has in the past. And in this environment, the agile worker has to be effective at reaching out, being more diplomatic in their communication, but whilst also being assertive. And then finally, the evolving mix of workers. Everything from the gig economy to a wider range of generations, cultural backgrounds, are all represented in an organisation. This requires people to work more effectively with many more people, despite how long they've actually known each other. And whilst nobody is going to be able to keep track of all the different norms and backgrounds that would make for ideal interactions, there are some core skills that can really help. So the agile worker needs to have those social and emotional skills to understand when to empathise, when to step back from biases and challenge their assumptions, and when to push back and stand up for themselves. And what these examples demonstrate is that building an agile organisation starts with developing the emotional intelligence of your workforce, of the people that drive your organisation forward each day. And this is the driving insight behind Everything DISC's Agile EQ. And this insight is something that many of the leaders surveyed in the research agree with. Excuse me. 97% of managers, directors, executives agree that developing emotional intelligence is crucial to building an agile workforce. And that's why I'm thrilled to introduce the newest addition to Everything DISC's application suite, Agile EQ. Now, Agile EQ is an assessment-based learning experience that was designed to teach participants to read the emotional and interpersonal needs of a situation and act and respond accordingly. The product combines personalised insights of DISC with the active emotional intelligence development to help participants learn to stretch and navigate outside of their behavioural comfort zone, empowering them to meet the demands of any situation, which you saw from my very brief set of examples can be quite vast, even in a single day at work. And to give you some grounding in this new product, I'm going to share an introduction video with you now. It's just over 2 minutes, so we'll be back in a moment.
We all have abilities that come naturally to us. Certain skills or mindsets that are so second nature, so effortless, using them feels like riding a bike. For Ava, that's keeping her cool when everyone around her is stressing out, or setting aside her own preferences long enough to really consider other points of view. Those are both kinds of emotional intelligence, but they aren't the only ones. Because the truth is, there are many different ways to be good at handling emotional and social situations, and people have different natural strengths. So, what are yours? That's where Agile EQ comes in. Using a tool called Everything Disc, Agile EQ provides a simple way to understand yourself and the kinds of emotional intelligence that may come naturally to you. Everything Disc describes 4 main styles. People with a D or dominant style are typically direct and firm. Their emotional intelligence really shines when they need to project confidence and persuade others. And they're usually good at speaking up for themselves. Those with an I or influence style are generally outgoing and enthusiastic. They're naturals at making connections wherever they go. And they tap into the energy in a room by paying attention to how people are feeling. People with an S or steadiness style are usually even-tempered and accommodating. They often excel at understanding where other people are coming from, and their calm, flexible approach helps keep conversations harmonious and collaborative. And finally, those with a C or conscientiousness style are typically analytical and reserved. Their EQ strengths involve stepping back and separating facts from their personal feelings, and they're often good at showing restraint, even in tense situations. You might have one of these styles or a blend of 2, like Ava, whose SC style means she has a combination of S and C traits. The strengths associated with that part of the disc map are probably easiest and most natural for her. But what about when Ava needs to, say, network with strangers or confront a coworker about a problem? In situations like these, she may have to reach for skills that don't come as naturally. And if she can't do that or doesn't think to try, that can create problems for her. Because sometimes our instinctive patterns don't work and actually end up boxing us in. Drawing on the principles of emotional intelligence, Agile EQ helps us discover our natural tendencies and recognize when to move beyond those familiar patterns. And that's what allows us to act, adapting to whatever situation we're facing. And that ability to adapt, to reach for a wider variety of responses, it's called agility. It's about stretching beyond our comfort zones when what's instinctive for us isn't enough. It means developing the flexibility to respond to different situations with the best possible approach, not just the one that's easiest. And really, the more agile we are in our responses, the more emotionally intelligent we become. And that empowers us to achieve things we never believed were possible, to enrich our relationships, and even to engage with the world in a new way.
Fabulous. Thanks, Alicia. I guess said simply, the promise of Everything Disc Agile EQ is twofold. For learners, Agile EQ helps them better handle the interpersonal and emotionally charged situations that they can encounter each day. And for organizations, it helps to develop the emotional intelligence of your workforce. And that's necessary to support a thriving Agile culture. But why this product authentically delivers on these promises is because, first and foremost, Agile EQ is built on the foundation of DISC and is grounded in a proven Everything DISC assessment. And that stems back from the 1920s when Dr. William Marston developed his findings based upon his studies of the behaviors and emotions of normal people. And Wiley have grown on the theory and the testing and the research of DISC. And as I said earlier, Agile EQ is the latest, most up-to-date model with the emotional intelligence built into it, which has over 40 years DISC research put into it. And it asks participants to respond to behavioral statements on a 5-point scale, including the EQ-specific questions to help determine the participants' instinctive EQ strengths. Now, it incorporates the latest computer adaptive testing methodology to ensure each participant receives precise insights to personalize their experience. And what that means is if myself and Alicia both took the assessment today, we probably wouldn't get exactly the same questions. In fact, we definitely wouldn't. No two people will receive exactly the same questions because we'd answer them differently. An adaptive testing methodology means that the next question it asks me is based on my last answer. So therefore, I would probably choose something completely different to Alicia. So next, Agile EQ actively develops an individual's emotional intelligence. And there's a vibrant industry for emotional intelligence training, and many of these solutions, they revolve around an EQ appraisal, which gives an individual measure of their emotional intelligence at a moment in time. But it's one thing to have insight into your emotional intelligence. It's another thing to use that information and grow and enhance your impact at work. And then it's yet another to scale it across your business and drive organizational performance. But everything DISC Agile EQ was designed with this pragmatic developmental approach in mind. And it's this emphasis that distinguishes Agile EQ from other emotional intelligence approaches. And finally, the Agile EQ learning experience is powered by the expertise of Culture Stretch. We're experts in tailoring everything DISC experience to the needs and the circumstances of your own business, and are empowered to bring this new application to life in a way that best addresses the needs of your organisation and your workforce. So, I have a question for you. For yourself, I'm sure a lot of you have used different personality profiles, and DISC is the one obviously that we choose to use, the psychometric test that we choose, which helps your teams and your colleagues better understand themselves. But there are a number of different ones out there. So if your answer was yes, then have a look at the screen now and see if it's any of these that are here. Just a few that we would suggest in the live webinar. Obviously DISC is on there, Insights, there's Myers-Briggs MBTI, Colour Me, 16 personalities, and there's a lot more out there. Just have a think about the ones that you've used. And if you have come across DISC, are you aware of the DISC workplace module, which is the very basic DISC module that we first start people with, which is around understanding yourself and understanding others for much better communication in the workplace. Now, before I jump into some background and theory supporting Agile EQ, I actually want you to ponder this question. What does emotional intelligence mean for you or to you? Just have a think about that. What does it actually mean for you as a person and mean for you as an organisation? What are you looking for? What challenges do you think this would help to solve? Now, emotional intelligence, or EQ as we know it, has been around for a long time. In fact, probably since the mid-60s when Daniel Goleman wrote his first intelligence book. And there are a lot of those EQ models out there. And when you start to see all these different emotional intelligence models, it begs the question, which one is the right one? What is the actual focus of the model? So when Wiley was deciding what model to use as the foundation for this experience, they considered prioritization and focus. And they landed with these three words: change, simplicity, and relevance. Now, first and foremost, there is a strong need to offer a model that enables real-world change. That's the number one goal. How do we help people change their habits and their behaviours? So this means the model needs to be simple enough that people can carry it around in their head and have conversations about it. Because if it's not simple, people just aren't going to be able to draw on it in their heads when they find themselves in those emotionally charged situations that actually call for it, which, as we saw earlier, can happen more and more frequently, especially now. And then lastly, it needed to be practical and relevant to the work that people do on a daily basis. They need to be able to quickly see themselves in it and their struggle. So look out for those three priorities as we unpack this experience today. And then from the focus emerges our definition of what is emotional intelligence to everything DISC. Now, one of the many assumptions that DISC carries into an organisation is there's no right or wrong way to be. No DISC style is better than any other. And similarly, with emotional intelligence, we seem to be used to talking about it as if you're either high or low emotional intelligence. It's like there's a single continuum where some people are poised on one end and mature and socially competent, and the people on the other end are either awkward or socially oblivious, or maybe somewhere in the middle. But the reality is there are many aspects of emotional intelligence, and actually you can be very emotionally intelligent in one aspect, like maybe remaining composed under pressure, but very stagnated in another one, like demonstrating empathy. So one of the things that Everything DISC brings to this broader EQ conversation is the understanding that we all have things we do well in the emotional intelligence arena. And for most of us, there are also things that we can do better to be more successful in our relationships and our emotional management. So this is the operating definition of emotional intelligence in the Agile EQ learning experience. But actually, if you strip it down to its essence, it's this. It's the ability to adapt to the demands of a situation. Now, some of us are really good in situations that call for assertion, but not good in situations that calls for patience. Some of us are naturally good in situations that call for caution, but not so good in situations that call for venturing out and, say, maybe networking and meeting new people. And as we've seen, the world is asking us more and more to be able to shift gears and handle different situations, but with equal competence. It is asking us to be more agile. So at its core, that's what we mean by agility, the ability to move quickly and easily. It's about problem solving. So with this definition in mind, I want to move on to the next topic in this section, which is the idea of stretch. Now, in the world of DISC, we often refer to being able to stretch across the map to meet somebody else's needs for more effective communication. And that's where our name came from, culture stretch. I've been a fan of DISC probably for the last 22, 25 years. And I totally understand and get the stretch. I get how difficult it is as well. But that's why we named our company Culture Stretch. Until now, there isn't a formal program to guide people through how you actually stretch. And I've been asked this before. How do you do it? Tell us how to do it. But actually, that is what we're teaching here with Agile EQ. We are helping this person with the D style, first of all, recognize that there is a need to stretch and then to actually do it. To be more empathizing or more receptive, or to be more composed when the situation calls for it. Now, I don't know which of you are familiar with Everything DISC, but if you are and you know the basic model, Everything DISC Workplace, then you might be asking yourself, how does this differ from that basic application, Workplace? Let me explain. With that same person, that focus is helping them to understand and adapt to the needs of other people. So, for example, it might be understanding and adjusting to a very cautious person. But the key distinction here, though, is that in Workplace, we're not teaching them to be more cautious. Dealing with a cautious person is substantially different than actually ramping up your own ability to be cautious, especially if that's completely outside of your own behavioural comfort zone. So I guess in the end, the Workplace model helps the learner respond to the needs of another person in communication versus Agile EQ helps that same learner respond to the needs of the situation. So the last question I want to tackle within our background and theory section is, what are we actually measuring in this assessment? And it's this, it's a learner's comfort in stretching to a given mindset. Mindsets are those words around the outside of the circle that you can see, and they're all elements of emotional intelligence, some of which come really naturally to a person, whilst others are quite unnatural and uncomfortable, as in this case of the D style. The D style's comfort in stretching to a mindset like empathy or receptivity or composure may be less comfortable than taking on a mindset of resolve or self-assurance or even being dynamic. And the way that Agile EQ illustrates the learner's comfort level is with a given mindset is through an effort meter, as you can see. So to give you a sense of how these are measured, first, Everything DISC Everything DISC Agile EQ, as I said earlier, is an assessment-based learning experience. So after the participant takes their DISC assessment, they're then presented with a set of questions with this heading. How easy or difficult is it for you to do each of the following? And so if we are trying to measure someone's comfort with the composed mindset, the question looks like this. How easy or difficult is it for me to stop myself when I'm really angry from saying something that I'll regret later? Or if we're measuring the receptive mindset, a question looks like this. How easy or difficult is it for me to remain receptive to other people's ideas when I have strong points to make? And the effort meters are the output of these questions, and they offer another layer of personalization to the experience, way above and beyond a person's DISC style. So, for example, one individual with a D style, it might take a lot of effort for them to take on that receptive mindset, whereas another individual with the same D style, it might not take on much effort at all to take on that receptive mindset. It is personal to each individual person. So that's a brief overview of some of the background and theory. We looked at our definition of emotional intelligence, what we actually mean by being agile when it comes to emotional intelligence, and then what the assessment measures. Before I move on to the next part of the experience, just a quick prod for you. If you've got any questions, write them down. We can pick them up on email afterwards if there's any questions about those first two parts of the experience. So, for those of you who are less familiar with everything DISC, each of their learning experiences, whether that is workplace or management, sales, productive conflict, work of leaders, and Agile EQ, they all follow a transformational learning module. Starting with computer adaptive psychometric assessment, the results of the assessment are then delivered to the learner through a personalized narrative style profile report or on our digital platform Catalyst. The product is brought to life in facilitation, and that experience engages and educates and creates those aha moments where people make that behavioral change possible when they realize that this is why they think or behave like this, and this is why somebody else thinks or behaves like this. And those points in the past, those references come to life as people become more aware of others but self-aware of themselves. And then finally, there's a suite of follow-up resources to inspire lasting behavioral change. Now, the Everything DISC Agile assessment is distilled down to two sets of questions. The core questions, which determine the DISC style, and the Agile EQ questions, which determine instinctive EQ mindsets. So the core questions build on over 40 years of DISC research and knowledge and measure two central aspects of personality. That is pace and skepticism. Now, each question asks participants to respond to behavioural statements on a 5-point scale. And a few examples here include statements like, I am accommodating, or I am methodical, to which a participant selects the level of degree they agree with those statements. On top of those core questions, the Agile EQ assessment measures each learner's comfort with those 8 EQ mindsets that sit around the outside of the map. And by indicating how easy or difficult it is to do each of the following behaviours. And I shared a few examples earlier, but another one might be being forceful with my opinion during a group debate, or patiently listening to someone even if I don't think they know what they're talking about. So once the learner has completed the assessment, their results are reported in a personalised profile, and that profile is then used in the facilitated learning process, which if it's done in one day is about 6 to 7 hours, dependent upon the number of delegates, but it can be adapted, it can be split up to meet the specific needs and time requirements of your business organisation. It can be done face-to-face or virtually and done in modules. It's very flexible and agile. Now, these two elements are used together to create a personalised learning experience for each participant. So let's take a high-level view of what this experience looks like and actually how it works. So this is the structure of the experience for both facilitation and profile. The first part of the experience helps the learners discover their own style and strengths. Now, if the delegates have already done the DISC workplace module, then this serves as a refresher, but if not, it's all new. The report and the facilitation provide insights into a learner's actual DISC style, as well as the EQ mindsets that needs that shape their interactions with their colleagues. So the second part of that helps the learner actually recognise the value of other approaches, what's available to them. The report and facilitation reveal the other EQ mindsets that lie outside of the learner's comfort zone, and it demonstrates the value of them stretching to a different mindset. The third part is all about taking action to become agile. And the learner gains insights and actionable strategies to start actually adopting an EQ mindset that's outside of their comfort zone and reach for the most effective response in a situation. So let's start with that first part, which is discover. Now, in this first part, on the surface, what we're doing here is a feel-good exercise to explore the learner's EQ strengths. But beneath that, in terms of the learning design, what we're actually doing is getting emotional buy-in and laying the groundwork for the rest of the experience. Because in this first module, the learner will develop an understanding of Agile EQ, develop an understanding of their own DISC style, and then learn about the other Agile EQ mindsets, specifically those that come more naturally to them. Like other everything DISC experiences, one of the first things done in facilitation is on page 2 of the profile, and that's grounding and level setting, ensuring that there's a common understanding of the term Agile EQ, which is defined in the profile here as the ability to read the emotional and interpersonal needs of a situation and respond accordingly. Below are the cornerstone principles, which level set the experience, ensuring it is respectful and positive for everyone. They also put the responsibility of learning into that learner's hands by helping them see that their emotional intelligence is not fixed, that it can be developed, and that DISC can help them better understand the EQ mindsets that come naturally to them, as well as those that might be a little bit more of a stretch. Now, the participants start to get familiar with the idea of learning to stretch to different mindsets, and then that gives them agility, and it helps them better adapt to social and emotionally charged situations. Now, next, the learner reviews a summary of the Agile EQ report and is introduced to those 3 modules I referred to earlier. Discover your own EQ mindsets, recognize and value other mindsets, and act to become more agile. And over the next few pages, we introduce or refresh the basic DISC model, depending on whether delegates have gone through workplace already. And we reinforce that no DISC style is more or less emotionally intelligent than another. We ground the learner in an overview of each style. And for those of you that are not aware of the DISC model, I'll just refer to it here on your screens. The D style is known as the dominant style. They tend to be direct, maybe strong-willed and results-orientated, action-oriented when they're in communication. The I style or the influence style tends to be enthusiastic and optimistic and lively, people through and through. The S style or the steadiness style tends to be accommodating and patient and humble, and they too are people. And the conscientiousness style, they tend to be analytical, precise, systematic, and even private. So still looking at the basics of DISC, we turn our attention to the individual. And this is where the personalized nature of the DISC profile comes alive. The participant's DISC style is revealed. And in this example on your screen, you can see the IS style, which is indicated in the navy blue box. Now, the learner's DISC style is also indicated by their dot placement within the DISC map. And whilst there are 4 main DISC styles, there are 12 blends of styles around the map. And you can see here that this learner's dot placement is located in the IS region of the map. Now, the dot placement itself is crucial to the map, as not only does it indicate the DISC style, it also indicates how strongly inclined that learner is to resonate with the characteristics and behaviours of that DISC style. So a dot located towards the edge of the DISC map indicates a strong inclination, whilst a dot closer to the centre is a more moderate inclination. Now, once we have grounded the learner's DISC style, page 5 now introduces the learner to the 8 Agile EQ mindsets, which start at the top and go clockwise. So just in case you can't read them, I'm going to read them out to you, but I'd really like you to think about which ones feel most natural to you. Which ones do you think might be in your comfort zone, your go-to behaviours day to day? So the first one is dynamic, to influence others, take action on new ideas. The next one, going right, is outgoing. These people love to build up relationships and express unfiltered thoughts. People that are great at the empathizing mindset understand others. They reach out to be supportive. That receptive mindset means to keep an open mind and consider others' perspectives, whilst being composed is about appearing calm and diplomatic. To be objective is to think rationally and clearly, and to be resolute, resisting pressure to cave in with what your beliefs and what your thoughts are. And then last but not least, as we come right the way around to the top, those with the self-assured mindset generally project confidence and take charge of things. So from here, the learners start to dig into their own EQ mindsets that shape their daily responses and interactions. And the shading on their map will highlight the mindsets the learner may adopt most frequently based on their DISC style, also known as their comfort zone. And for this IS style learner, their three most comfortable mindsets are outgoing, empathizing, and the receptive mindset. Now, the profile introduces the learner to each of these mindsets, including some of the psychological needs that drive those behaviors. And in this case, some of the needs that drive the empathizing mindset are a really strong desire for connection and a need for acceptance. But beyond this, the learner gains insights into some of the benefits and potential challenges of their natural EQ mindsets. So in the facilitated learning sessions, the learners are asked to read and to personalize these pages. They place a check mark next to the statements that ring true and crosses next to statements that don't quite feel right. Typically, we see lots of check marks, but it is important to help the learners own their own data. Page 8 of the profile is the learner's EQ snapshot, and it's the first time that Wiley has used an infographic within a profile report, and people seem to love this page. It can be a great takeaway or something to share or something to pin up in your workspace, whether that be at home, working remote, or in the office, just to remind you that, do you know what, these are my EQ strengths. They're the things that I am really good at and the things that I should be proud of. And it reminds learners that there are aspects of emotional intelligence that are their natural strengths. It then outlines those psychological needs that drive the learner's instinctive mindsets. And the facilitation includes an exercise that helps people see how some of their greatest strengths are driven by these underlying needs. It offers some great personal insights and those aha moments for people, but also it lays the groundwork for later when they realise that those same needs are exactly what makes it tough for them to stretch, even though that stretch is actually good for them. It also reminds our learners of the effects they have on others, and that's both positive and negative. So both pages here and the facilitated learning help build the foundation for each learner to generate their own insights later on in order for them to take action. So that's a quick overview of part 1, which is Discover. The second section is designed to help people realise that actually they could be more effective. So the aim is to recognise and value other mindsets. It's designed to open their eyes to new possibilities, to normalise and help people realise that the struggle they're facing doesn't equal some developmental failure. Actually, the very structure of the model assumes that there will be some things that people struggle with, because everyone has something that they struggle with. Excuse me, I'm struggling with an itchy nose. The learning objectives for part 2 therefore help the learner understand the need and the value of other EQ mindsets. It also helps them understand the value of stretching to a less comfortable EQ mindset when a situation calls for it. And in this module, learners watch a video that introduces the value of considering mindsets outside of their own EQ comfort zone. So to bring this idea to life in guided facilitation, participants will prepare a small presentation on their own most comfortable mindset and teach each other about its benefits. It's a really insightful part of the facilitated experience here, because coming up with a presentation about a person's most comfortable EQ mindset, but then also hearing your peers describe EQ mindsets that are quite uncomfortable for you, but a strength for them. And there are additional support videos in this section to cover off any mindsets that aren't chosen. So moving back to the profile, pages 10 to 14 introduce the learner to their Agile opportunities. And these are the 5 mindsets that fall outside of their comfort zone. There's 1 per page per EQ opportunity to work through. And the learners first learn the definition of the mindset. So in the example we looked at earlier, which was the composed mindset, the definition is reflecting before acting, moderating your responses, even under stress, and exercising diplomacy. Well, next, the learner sees the effort meter associated with their specific mindset. And remember, these effort meters offer a level of detail for the learner based on their own assessment. And they can now see how much effort it's going to take to try on this EQ opportunity. Not how well the learner uses it today, or even their potential to use it in the future. For this learner, taking on the composed mindset is a moderate amount of effort. The last section helps open the learner's eyes to see why they might use the mindset. It's personalized to their style and EQ opportunities, so it can feel like having a coach customizing this advice of this mindset to their own perspective and values. And it goes one step further than that to tell the learner when they actually might find this helpful. So facilitation delivers an activity which involves demonstrating mindsets in action, and it involves more video content of concrete demonstrations of what to do and equally what not to do. So the learner can really start to begin visualizing what stretching looks like and inspiring them on the need to change. By the end of the module, the goal is for them to commit to a mindset that they want to get more comfortable with themselves. Now, in module 3 is probably the most straightforward module, but in my opinion, it's the most difficult as it involves taking action to change behavior. After all, you can only encourage people to see the benefits that change would bring. And I recently worked with a large fintech organization and a small group of developers whose natural skepticism made me unsure as to whether they would engage. However, many of them grasped it with both hands and embraced the changes it could bring, not only in their professional life, but in their personal lives as well. I do recognise that legitimate behaviour change is tough. And we all have these instinctive habits that we've been ground into for years, I guess, and pushing back against them takes a lot of effort. And by nature, our brain tries to save us effort. It tries to take the easy route. And even if that means we make choices that aren't so great for us in the long term. Now, the clients that I have worked with in the past have found better success with embedding change when they schedule follow-up group calls for Agile EQ. For more support and accountability. And it's really helped people learn from others on the smaller calls by sharing experiences and embedding those behavioural changes. And that's been a mixed group of people from apprentices to middle managers, right the way up to C-suite level. It's good to get a mix of people to be able to share these things. Now, in module 2, we talked about what to change. And in module 3, we explore how to change. So the learning objectives in this module are to explore the anticipated difficulties in stretching to a new mindset, and then create an action plan for stretching to a new mindset. But before I share some of these details of the personalised report, I want to share the introduction video of this module, as it really explains what it takes to become more agile and why it isn't easy. Again, it's about 2.5 minutes, so we'll be right back.
So how can you act? What does it really take to enhance your EQ? First, it's important to be ready for the resistance you may get from inside your own head. Think of it like this. In some ways, your mind is like a GPS, creating go-to routes, default responses that you take time and again until they become second nature. So if you deviate from them, there might be a voice inside your head saying that your new direction is wrong, trying to steer you back to the way you've always done things. Telling you, for example, that standing your ground with a coworker will damage your relationship. or that giving a new idea the benefit of the doubt is just too risky. Often, that voice can be hard to ignore. After all, it's built on a lifetime of habits. But by putting those doubts into perspective, you can start stretching to new mindsets. It's okay if it feels uncomfortable or even a little scary. That's part of the process. Increasing your agility is all about small, manageable steps taken from a starting point that makes sense for you. Remember how Ava was having trouble speaking up in meetings? Expecting her to jump in and become a fearless debater overnight probably isn't realistic. Instead, she might start by looking for low-stakes chances to make her voice heard, maybe with people she trusts will really listen. Then, over time, and with practice, she'll become more comfortable speaking up, even in difficult situations. So, what does this mean for you? Above all, that developing your Agile EQ takes persistence. These kinds of changes don't happen all at once, but they can happen. You can become the person others look to for support, or the one who always keeps their cool, or the one who shares their ideas with confidence. All these destinations are within your reach. So, where do you want to go?
Okay, thank you. Because developing EQ takes persistence, it takes a lot of effort to overcome those old habits. And for that reason, on page 15 of the profile, the learner is asked to select a single EQ opportunity that they want to tackle. And for this learner, we're going to choose the composed mindset. So here the learner recognizes that a good half of the battle is psychological, changing the way that you're thinking. Remember the video, that GPS in our heads telling us how to reach the route, that we've consciously have to train ourselves to ignore those voices in our heads, those that are telling us to go with what's comfortable instead of consciously choosing to stretch to a different mindset. These pages arm people by helping them understand the struggle that they're going to face. And for this example, if the IS style chooses to work on the composed mindset, we can put ourselves in their shoes. We can imagine ourselves in a meeting where something went wrong with one of your projects, totally outside of your control, yet your team is telling you, detailing all the ways to avoid this happening again in the future. Someone with an IS style working on that composed mindset might have thoughts like, but this wasn't my fault. Now, these kind of thoughts will come up as they're driven by our psychological needs right here. These needs are really powerful and effective at pulling you back into old habits. And you can imagine someone with a strong need for acceptance, their brain is going to be like telling them, I need to defend myself. Can't believe they care so little about my feelings. So the goal is to help the person anticipate even the habitual thoughts that will stop them from stretching. And we want you to mentally prepare for the resistance of your own brain. And it's going to tell you that you're feeling uncomfortable. And actually, that's not a sign that you're doing it wrong. In fact, that could be the opposite. That could be a sign that you're changing and growing, because it will be uncomfortable at first. Now, at the bottom of the page, we ask people to choose where they want to start. And the profile and the facilitated learning is designed to meet people at where they're at. So they get to choose the start point. And you can see here some baby steps that we might take somebody through who was trying to remain composed in a heated situation. In this instance, if the learner selects the intermediate starting point, we can see that some of their first steps include things like noticing early on when their attitude or their composure is starting to deteriorate, or even catching themselves when they're in a bad mood before it gets to the point where they actually shut down. The very next page of the profile provides some concrete tips for change depending upon where each learner is at in their journey. So to follow through with this same example, if the learner has selected the intermediate starting point, they're offered a few pragmatic strategies for becoming more agile when the situation calls for it. The learner can choose between them and take ownership of how they will take action. And we are encouraging people to find something that they will actually do. And the final page of the profile focuses on action planning. It asks the learner these questions. Why did you choose this mindset? Where will you start? What is your biggest obstacle for completing this step? And how will you overcome that? Becoming more agile takes practice, and this action plan page is a tool that the learner can keep nearby or even digitally and refer to regularly for their own self-development. So that is a brief summary of the Agile EQ learning experience. Participants discover their own strengths, recognize their EQ opportunities, and then act to become more agile. To help them develop the EQ necessary to navigate a wider range of social and emotionally charged situations that they face, both inside and outside of work, day in, day out. For ongoing help to keep DISC alive, we have an awesome platform called Catalyst, where learners can access everything in the profile in a user-friendly format and continue their learning digitally. They can also connect to their co-workers. Your whole organization goes on there, or whoever is profiled. You can run comparison reports to each other. Alicia and I can go onto our platform and run comparison reports. I'm a D style, if you hadn't guessed, and Alicia is a CS style. So we are different in many ways, but we're also similar in many ways. And we can understand that by sharing information and comparing ourselves and then working out how to work better together. And then also we can use the Agile EQ part of the Catalyst platform to continue to develop ourselves, develop our action plan and work on that with the strategies I shared with you. However, this isn't a showcase of that platform, but I am happy to take anyone through it if you want to jump on a group call, a one-to-one call, or you can join another group in one of our other Catalyst showcases, and the links to that is in our events page on our website, and we will share that with you in our follow-up email. I'll also like to send out a PDF version of a sample report to anybody who would like to have one today to give you more in-depth detail into what is in the profile for Agile EQ. But that brings me to the end of this. Thanks to everybody for joining, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.